Well, how long do you think certain sports or games go back in time? Quite often, and it used to be my little tagline for I've had so many videos where I got to say, this goes back much older than previously thought. So let's look at one game that we know of now today that's actually a sport, requires athletics and dexterity, and a little bit of strategy and things too. Let's talk about bowling. Did you know the ancient Egyptians played bowling over 5,000 years ago? In fact, it'll go back a little farther than that, you'll see. Bowling can be traced to ancient Egypt. It was a popular game practiced in ancient Egypt over 5,000 years ago. And ancient Egyptians played a game in a large hall that was a cross between bowling and lawn balls. Many people know about lawn bowling and so on. However, the two people played at once, one at either end of a 4-meter long lane. So here you can see a depiction of part of it here with an Egyptian actually holding something and in a posture that looks just like bowling balls. Now, that's amazing. On the left here is Musée de la Boule, and this is to actually amuse yourself by playing with a ball. But anybody that's played any of the games that are associated with this knows that it's very intricate. In fact, from this derives people taking and using a mallet and hitting a slightly smaller ball, usually made out of wood, not necessarily rolling a stone ball that's made as a perfect ball. And by the way, whenever they find this, the balls that are associated with it are those diorite balls they try to get everybody to believe are pounding balls, and that's what they ended up making all of those squared off stones somehow with. That and just copper, right? Irregardless, let's just get into this here. In the 1930s, a British anthropologist, Sir Flinders Petrie, very famed, discovered all sorts of primitive bowling balls, among a lot of other things. He found bowling pins and other materials in the grave of an Egyptian boy from 3200 BC. So it appears that the ancient Egyptians played a primitive form of bowling, and that bowling is more than 5,200 years old, because we're in the year 2000. That's quite a feat. More recently, Professor Etta Bresciani, an Egyptologist at the University of Pisa, and a team found evidence of an ancient Egyptian game that was a mixture of bowling, billiards, and lawn bowls, and was played at Narmothios in the Fayum region, which we've talked about mummies from recently, some 90 kilometers south of Cairo. It was played in a spacious room that seems to be the prototype of a modern bowling hall. The room was part of a structure, perhaps a residential building, which dated from the Roman period, specifically between the 2nd and 3rd century AD, and inside the room was a lane and 2 stone balls. The lane was about 4 meters long, 20 centimeters wide, and 10 centimeters deep, and there was 10 centimeters square opening at its center. The balls had different diameters. One fitted exactly the square opening. The other could run smoothly along the lane. So they were using them in a few different ways. So on the left here is representative of Musée de Boule that's found with it. And there's these people that are in this competition. There's probably somebody on the other side they're talking about. You can see that sun symbols that are all along their belts that are there. But then they're holding also bowling balls, a little smaller than the ones we think of nowadays. But because we're talking about other things in lawn bowling and things like that that go along with it, eventually croquet comes from this, from somebody taking a mallet and deciding to strike it with a mallet. Because the ball is a little bit too heavy to do anything with, they had to be a little bit smaller. And if you've ever played croquet with your kid, and you can put a ball against a ball and knock them and do things like that, there are games like that. And so this mallet, being real flat, would knock into the ball there. Well, eventually they realized that the whip stick that's attached to this also helps make some of the percussion in that. Choosing certain woods for that was important, and for the face. And then, through perfection of, instead of trying to roll them along the ground, which slowed them down when they were hitting the ground, somebody got the bright idea, instead of being faced up and hitting the balls out, if they leaned that thing back a little bit and hit into it, it would project it in the air for a long way and then land. Golf is derived from this, and other games. So we can see that depiction there on the left and the right. It says ancient Egyptians played a bowls-like game as far back as 7200 BC, which spread across the Mediterranean, evolving into bocce in Italy, pétanque in France, musique de bowl, and bowls in Queensland, which is Europe, and then Australia. Ancient Egyptians played a bowls-like game as far back as 7200 BC, which spread across the Mediterranean. Bishani says the game was played by two players positioned at two ends of the lane. One would throw the smaller ball, the other the bigger one. They would throw the balls at the same time, and most likely the bigger ball was thrown along the lane to prevent the smaller ball from entering the hole at the center. Just kind of makes sense whenever you're looking at it, so they would have made something along that line. Here they show a picture or a painting of France and Spain. It's known it was played with a wooden or stone balls, and that was called a boule, which is ball, and pétanque. It was introduced into Great Britain with the Norman Conquest, where its name loosely translated is throwing the stone. So that makes sense. Image via Bowls, Queensland. So you can see these gentlemen all gathering around and having a bowling competition. This is just the gathering, and they're talking about it, and these two are probably boasting to each other before or after a win. Tabulating on the left. Crowd off there. So when this happened, the smaller ball could easily be recovered from the sand-filled terracotta vase below. So in this Egyptian form of it, it fell into a pit, but it's filled with sand, and so it stopped the ball from doing it. Somebody could grab the ball and bowl it back to you. One later thing that was found is somebody took and made a V channel, like a gutter. We always called gutter balls and things like that. And because it was raised at the far end from you, they could take the ball and put it back on that and roll it right back to you, and it would land in a little sand pit. And then you could pick up the ball and use it again. Oh, it's all fancy. Each player took in turns to throw the smaller ball, which determined the winner of the game. The winner was the player who was able to place the ball into the hole more times. Modern bowling is claimed to have roots in Germany around 300 AD, but it seems to be derived from this. Here's a depiction shown in the Middle Ages. By the way, Philip V and Charles V prohibited bowling games eventually, and it was the game of kings for a long time, and rich and royalty. Golf always seemed to be something along that line a little bit too, because paying for being in the country clubs and so on, it's rather expensive. If you'll look here, they're bowling and having a game and a competition. But because there's a smaller ball involved in the bigger balls and a rolling of it, and you can tell he's gauging the roll and trying to make sure he knocks one out but keeps the other one in. This is also something that we see in ice and winter games. whenever you see curling. And whenever they take that flattened ball, which is more of a puck, giant puck at that, and push that down with spins on it and so, trying to reach a bullseye. But in doing so, when other people get in the way and stuff, or you want to knock them out, if you watch it, they knock each other out, and these people are real damn good at it. And another neat effect they use is brooms, where they're able to brush the ice real quick and make it go faster, and even help direct it a little bit, slow it down and stop it by stopping that effect, engage and try to make the pucks work in a certain way. So ice curling is really bowling kind of coming out of this. It works with the Scandinavian type people and stuff and all up through there, but you can see a definite effect that goes with this. There's also this things that went on with pins in ancient Egypt, where he's talking about, and it's really something that's a bat. For if you think about it, that's what a bowling pin is, but it's got a flattened end so you can stand it up. The other end is more of a handle. So this is more likely where today's pins were introduced. Parishioners were instructed to place their kegels. This is a pin resembling item that most Germans carried for protection and sport. This is what we call a bat. It's where a bat from baseball came from too. Wow. It's amazing how there's all these connections comes out of these ball games. Maybe I ought to do a series on it, going through each one and showing you connectives. But what's real, and especially like the Olympic Games and where those come from, and why would you want to worry about how far you could throw this or do these certain things? Some of them seems pretty self-explanatory. Other ones don't seem to be. But this pin carried for protection is really a bat, right? And if you think about this, this was used to entertain kings too. And you always saw a juggler in the old days throwing around some of these bats, which has a two-way concourse when you think about the fact that it's actually a weapon thing, but a game, and he's throwing around. Pretty interesting. So at the end of a long lane, they had to roll a rock or the kegel, and if they knocked the kegel over, their sins were absolved. What? Yes, this was a game for your soul that they had going on. Back in the Middle Ages, things were a little cray-cray, and they basically had, parishioners were instructed to place their kegels at the end of a long hallway lane, and they had to roll a rock at the kegel, and if they knocked the kegel